was like this. Last week, they had taken the child back to the hospital, and the doctor had examined it carefully and told them that there was nothing the matter. "It took us 9 years to get this baby, Doctor," Mabel had said. "I think it would kill me if anything should happen to her." That was 6 days ago, and since then it had lost another 5 ounces. But worrying about it wasn't going to help anybody, Albert Taylor told himself. One simply had to trust the doctor on a thing like this. He picked up the magazine that was still lying on his lap and glanced idly down the list of contents to see what it had to offer this week. Among the bees in May, honey cookery, the bee farmer and the bee farm, experience in the control of nosema, the latest on royal jelly. This week in the apiary, the healing power of propolis, regurgitations, British beekeepers' annual dinner, association news. All his life, Albert Taylor had been fascinated by anything that had to do with bees. As a small boy, he used often to catch them in his bare hands and go running with them into the house to show to his mother, and sometimes he would put them on his face and let them crawl about over his cheeks and neck, and the astonishing thing about it all was that he never got stung. On the contrary, the bees seemed to enjoy being with him. They never tried to fly away, and to get rid of them he would have to brush them off gently with his fingers. Even then, they would frequently return and settle again on his arm or hand or knee, any place where the skin was bare. His father, who was a bricklayer, said there must be some witch's stench about the boy, something noxious that came oozing out through the pores of the skin, and that no good would ever come of it, hypnotizing insects like that. But the mother said it was a gift given him by God, and even went so far as to compare him with St. Francis and the birds. As he grew older, Albert Taylor's fascination with bees developed into an obsession, and by the time he was 12, he had built his first hive. The following summer, he had captured his first swarm. 2 years later, at the age of 14, he had no less than 5 hives standing neatly in a row against the fence in his father's small backyard. And already, apart from the normal task of producing honey, he was practicing the delicate and complicated business of rearing his own queens, grafting larvae into artificial cell cups, and all the rest of it. He never had to use smoke when there was work to do inside a hive, and he never wore gloves on his hands or a net over his head. Clearly, there was some strange sympathy between this boy and the bees, and down in the village, in the shops and pubs, they began to speak about him with a certain kind of respect, and people started coming up to the house to buy his honey. When he was 18, he had rented 1 acre of rough pasture alongside a cherry orchard down the valley, about a mile from the village, and there he had set out to establish his own business. Now, 11 years later, he was still in the same spot, but he had 6 acres of ground instead of 1, 240 well-stocked hives, and a small house that he'd built mainly with his own hands. He had married at the age of 20, and that, apart from the fact that it had taken them over 9 years to get a child, had also been a success. In fact, everything had gone pretty well for Albert, until this strange little baby girl came along and started frightening them out of their wits by refusing to eat properly and losing weight every day. He looked up from the magazine and began thinking about his daughter. That evening, for instance, when she had opened her eyes at the beginning of the feed, he had gazed into them and seen something that frightened him to death. A kind of misty, vacant stare, as though the eyes themselves were not connected to the brain at all, but were just lying loose in their sockets like a couple of small grey marbles. Did those doctors really know what they were talking about? He reached for an ashtray and started slowly picking the ashes out from the bowl of his pipe with a matchstick. One could always take her along to another hospital.